one, and now.
Welcome to a virtual campfire presented by Hunter Nation. What a great night we're going to have tonight. I feel like it's old home week. Of course, Ted and I did the nightly Nuge for 2 years now. And so I almost wanted to say, Ted, welcome to another edition of the nightly Nuge. It's kind of that, except this is even more special. We have Keri Lake, Senate candidate down in Arizona with us. And what we're trying to do tonight, Ted, is we're trying to inform the Arizona hunters and all the patriots down there exactly where Keri Lake stands on the issues that matter most to them. But before we start, I do want to say that we invited Ruben Gallego on, the same as we invited Keri Lake on, and we only have Keri Lake. So, Ted Nugent, first of all, welcome. Tell our listeners a little bit about Hunter Nation, and what does it say to you that only one of the two Senate candidates thought it was important to come and talk to the Arizona hunters?
Well, number one, greetings, everybody. It is the sacred hunting season in the Nugent swamps of Michigan. It's a tradition here that this is my 76th deer season. And Keri Lake, it's our honor to have you here because we've been watching you stand up for conservative values. Isn't it interesting? Conservative, conservation, Constitution. Yep. That's really what you represented. You represented in an uncompromising, absolutist standpoint. So I'm going to turn it over to you because everybody already knows that I stand for God, family, country, Constitution, Bill of Rights, 10 Commandments, Golden Rule, Declaration of Independence, work ethic, law and order, good over evil, all that radical stuff. But Keri Lake, you have always stood up for that. And we know that there's an untapped conservative voting army. And they're untapped because we've got the data of the licensed hunters around the country, especially the great state of Arizona. And they're looking for someone who will stand up and inspire those who heretofore have not registered to vote. They're conservatives. We know these hunters. God, family, country, law and order, Second Amendment, First Amendment. Keri Lake, you have done a fantastic job defying the status quo and the predictable compromising of politicos out there. Keri Lake, why should the Arizona licensed hunters, the conservatives, the constitutionalists, conservationists, why would they vote for Keri Lake and why would they vote conservative values in the great state of Arizona?
Well, we need them to vote. This is kind of it, Ted. I mean, really, if you think about it, everything that you just mentioned is on the line in this election. The Constitution is on the line. I know why Ruben Gallego's not here. He wants to get rid of our gun. He wants to take our guns away from us. And that's not just, I'm not just saying that because we're in politics. He truly wants mandatory gun buybacks, just like Kamala Harris does. And so for the people who love to hunt, who love to fish. You forgot mentioning fishing here in Arizona. I know we're in the desert, but we do have some great fishing as well here. Yeah. People who love conservationism, who want to make sure that they can go out, whether they're hunting big cats or like me at the beginning of dove season, and you're out for a hunt, even though I'm not very good. You want to enjoy this heritage. This is American heritage. And everything's on the line in this election. That's why we've actually been working at gun shows. We've been working outside of, all kinds of, stores where they're featuring, fishing gear and hunting gear and all of that, because we want to make sure that these people realize what's on the line. Our very right to own a gun is on the line right now. They want to take our Second Amendment away. They want to take our First Amendment away. They're censoring us now, and they have been for some time. So everything's on the line. No one can sit home. No one can sit home on this election. We have watched as they've tried to push more and more restrictions in this last administration, whether it be on our First Amendment rights, on our Second Amendment rights. They brought back, the gray wolf that was taken off the Endangered Species Act under President Trump has been brought back onto it. And if you don't think the endangered species, we all know on this call, the Endangered Species Act has been a nightmare in many, many ways. It needs to be vastly revised. And the waters of the U.S. has been a disaster as well. And it's all about taking away our rights to the land and we don't have access to. Most of the land in Arizona, more than 80%, close to 90%, is owned by the government or some form of a government entity. And they want to continue to take more and more from us. So we have this big, beautiful state, and we don't have access to use the lands. And that's wrong. They're taking away our rights. And so I'm very much in support of our Second Amendment, our ability to use our public lands for enjoyment. That's what God gave us this great, beautiful earth for. And also to make sure that we don't watch the government, a bunch of bureaucrats back in Washington, D.C., telling us where we can hunt, where we can fish, what kind of gun we can own. We need to send them a big reminder that we have inalienable rights and they're protected by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And that Second Amendment is truly the bodyguard of those rights.
No question about it. A lot of people think that they got constitutional carry recently. Well, I try to remind them that when you were born, you already had the right to keep and bear arms from God, the self-evident truths that are outlined in the Constitution. You
That's right.
don't need paperwork. You don't need some man to give you a permit or a license. And that the Second Amendment has absolutely nothing to do with shooting a deer or a dove. The Second Amendment is about we the people having arms, not just King George, but the citizens. In the great state of Arizona, when we talk about hunting, fishing, trapping, and you brought up the incredible example of the gray wolf. Everybody knows that it is one of the greatest success stories in the history of conservation because they are not endangered. They're hunted throughout the year in Canada and up in Alaska and in those states that have opened the season and put that wolf in the asset column as a regulated hunting, just like you do elk, just like you do pronghorn antelope and deer and javelina. It's a big game species. So what can you say, Keri, the real voting army of conservatives, and we studied the statistics in Arizona. You're talking about every quality of life issue. Even though we're reaching out to licensed sportsmen and conservation families, the border, a country without a secure border is not a country. And we have an engineered invasion. We know that right now Uncle Sam has intentionally opened that border, and those invaders, they don't follow game laws. They don't follow bag limits. They don't get a hunting license or fishing license, but we know that they're literally using up and abusing these wildlife resources. So if you could face an Arizona hunter that heretofore has not registered to vote, what would you say directly to him, how these issues dictate whether he has a quality of life or he's treated as a second-rate citizen, as it's happening right now under Biden-Harris?
Well, this administration does treat us as we're serfs under this administration. There's no doubt about it. I've been to the border so many times, too many to count. And I'll never forget the moment a light bulb went off. And I was watching, we'd been down there for several hours. We watched one van from Border Patrol to come and take people off and go to process them, and another one and another one. They just kept pouring across. I couldn't believe my eyes. And then I realized, oh my gosh, our federal government is part and parcel to this. They're running our Border Patrol agents and forcing them to process people and bring them into our country. It's absolutely despicable what they're doing. But worse than that, they're then putting them up, paying money. My opponent wants to just keep pouring millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into the NGOs that are part of the trafficking operation and send them to all points across this country. And you and I are paying for every cent of it. We're paying to put these people up, millions of them. I've heard upwards of 20 million or maybe more in 4-star hotels and apartment complexes. They're literally kicking American citizens out of some of these housing, whether it be apartments or hotels, to put illegals in. And the government, which is we, the people, are paying for it and footing the bill. And then they are working for peanuts because they don't have any monthly expenses. They got an EBT card with thousands of dollars on it. The government's paying, we are paying for their housing, and they're keeping our wages deflated and depressed, I should say. And it's an absolute sin what they're doing to the American people. And I am just like President Trump. We need to take these people who've come in during this invasion and repatriate them back to their homeland. As I say, we're going to send them back to their loved ones, because in order to save our country, they cannot stay. My opponent wants them to stay. He wants to give them voting rights. He wants to make sure that they are able to stay here forever and vote and permanently change our country. Everything is on the line right now. And I want to speak to the folks out there who are conservationists. You care more about the environment than these environmentalists. Just look at the solar fields and and the wind the wind energy they're creating. You want to talk about pollution? We're going to have water that is so polluted in 20 years when all of these solar panels are sent over to the trash, and the wind turbines are sent to the trash. The Democrats and the environmentalists don't care about conservation. They don't care about protecting species. It is truly the hunters of America that do, and we need to protect that. It's all on the line right now. I ask that if you're here in Arizona and you're registered to vote, that you make it a point to get that ballot turned in or go out and vote early. Vote for President Trump. He will always protect your Second Amendment rights. I will always protect your Second Amendment rights. For many people, hunting and fishing is a sport. For many people right now with this dismal economy, it's the difference between living and starving.
Yes.
And
You know what?
it's imperative.
Yeah. So you know what, Keri? One of the things that Ted always talks about on our podcast is engineered recidivism, which is our government is basically creating repeat crime. We polled all the hunters in Arizona recently. We were on the phones there and knocking on doors. And these kitchen table issues matter a lot to them. The border is very important. On the topic of engineered recidivism, what impact do you believe the open border has had on crime, human trafficking? You mentioned our loss of jobs.
Economy.
And what would be your plan? How are you going to, or what are you going to put forth that's going to stop this invasion? Because that's really important to the Arizona hunters.
I'm so glad you asked that, because the border affects everything. When people say, how do we deal with chronic street homelessness? Well, we've got to secure the border first, because we've got fentanyl and drugs pouring across in the cartels. How do we deal with the economy? There's a lot of ways to deal with that, but the border affects the economy. It's a basic supply and demand. You got 20 million people here illegally invading our country, and they're taking housing that we need. And they're taking resources that we need. So the price of all of that goes up. You want to talk about security and safety on the streets? We are bringing in Venezuelan, Chilean gang members. We're bringing in insane people out of insane asylums. Literally, the border is affecting every aspect of our life. And if you're just truly a compassionate person that wants to protect people, you have to look at the 350,000 children trafficked across the border that this incompetent administration full of imbeciles has lost track of. And you cringe, you lay awake at night worrying about those kids. It affects everything. And most importantly, it's hurting the American citizen. And we're sick of being put last with this administration. We need to get back to those great Trump America First policies. I'm going to be a friend to President Trump in the Senate. I'm not going to be the type of person that stabs him in the back like we've seen so many times. And my opponent he's voted with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden 100% of the time. He called the border wall dumb and stupid. He called Trump supporters the worst people in the world. And now he wants to come in and represent us when he hates us? I don't think so. And now we're finding out that it makes more sense that he's been keeping the border open. We're finding out that everything he said about his life has been a lie. His father is a convicted felon Mexican drug trafficker. And he's been lying about that. And once you're in the cartel, you're always in the cartel. And this is a very dangerous man who's lied about his past. And he's getting away with it, guys, because as you know, the news media has gone full on rotten, corrupt, and they will not cover his background. They know it's full of lies and a lot of danger signs, and they're not covering it.
Well, Keri, I got to tell you, what you're talking is the Nugent family language and the language of the best families in America. And I'm humbled and honored every week. And I have a sunrise safaris, and people come and hunt with Shemaine and I every weekend in our camp in Michigan. Literally,
I hope you don't invite Tampon Tim Walls.
No, I only invite safe gun handlers, or actually know how to handle a gun. Isn't that embarrassing? But that's a perfect example. What you are expressing here is not just Keri Lake's truth, logic, and common sense, or the Ted Nugent or Keith Mark's common sense. It is common to the point of universality. I went to the doctor this morning, and every nurse, every doctor, every assistant came out and wanted to talk about hunting and fishing and the great outdoors and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and being the best that you can be, putting your heart and soul to be an asset to your family in this great country. So as you express these self-evident truths, I want to just remind you that you're doing the work of God right now, because every time you open that pretty mouth of yours, you represent those families that share a campfire, and they come from every imaginable walk of life, every color, every creed, every socioeconomic strata. And
That's
that
right.
truth, logic, and common sense that Keri Lake has always stood up for, and that I see here on the panel of the people chiming in, it's not a Ted Nugent hunch. It's not a Keri Lake hunch. It is truth, logic, and common sense. So do not ever falter. And thank you for standing that strong stand. But the families of America that know that our heart and soul is not being currently represented, we thank people like you who are not afraid to stand up and be as politically incorrect as possible and just stomp on the status quo that is taking away the American dream quality of life. So Keri Lake, much love from all the Nugent gang out here, because you represent us in a wonderful, positive way.
Thank
You
you
know what,
so
Ted?
much.
She mentions Tim Waltz, and not singling him out, obviously, because Hunter Nation, we don't endorse a particular candidate or a party. I mean, we're looking for the candidates and the party that is going to best represent the Hunter values of God, family,
Yes.
country, the Constitution. But isn't it offensive when politicians pander for Hunter votes in just a few weeks every 4 years,
Yep.
as opposed to Donald Trump Jr., singling him out? He's on our Hunter Nation board of directors.
He's great.
I hunt with Don. He is a legitimate hunter. The guy we saw the other day, he didn't even know how to load a shotgun. He doesn't talk hunting issues at all in Minnesota. The gray wolf is devastating the deer herd in Minnesota, but yet he's not for science-based conservation. I find it offensive. I do follow you on social media, Keri. I love your posts about deer hunting. I mean, you come across as a legitimate, real hunter because you post about hunting, not just every now and again, but you do it. Tell us a Keri
Well,
Lake hunting story. Tell our hunters, tell us a story.
I will tell you a story. I'm not a deer hunter. We went out as a group dove hunting on the first day of dove season. I apparently have hired a lot of hunters on my campaign. I didn't even realize it when I hired them, but they were all asking to have the first day of dove hunting season off. And I finally just had to say, okay, literally everybody can have September 1st off, because I knew they were going to come up with mystery ailments if I didn't do it. So we all went out and went dove hunting, and I brought my daughter out, and turns out she was the most successful hunter of the day. It was just beginner's luck for my daughter. I'm more of a Second Amendment. I love the Second Amendment. I realize the importance of it because my dad taught government and history and foreign history. He is a history buff. He's not with us any longer, but I love target shooting, and I like to practice so that if I ever, God forbid, have to use my weapon, I pity the fool that I have to use it against, because my husband and I go target practice all the time. And I want to know how to use and handle our weapons. I want to know how to use and handle them properly. That's why it was so embarrassing watching Tim Walz. And whether you're hunting because you need to, it's feeding your family, whether you're hunting because it's a sport and you love it, we have to remember the real reason for the Second Amendment. As I said, it is truly the bodyguard protecting our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, our very republic. And it's protecting, more importantly, our God-given rights. These are rights given to us by God.
There's one other issue I wanted to get into. We polled the hunters in Arizona, and the three issues that mattered most to them is the economy. You've talked about that. The border, you've talked about that. Number 3 is the transgender issue. Ted, he talks about this a lot. You know, he loved watching the Olympics because he got to watch grown men beat up girls in the Olympics. Isn't that something? So,
it's crazy.
Because that is one of the top 3 issues that polled among our hunters in Arizona. What would you say to our hunters on that issue?
On the transgender issue, I can't even believe this has become a issue. I can't even believe it's in our vernacular, but it's become pushed so far by the left that this isn't even the Democrat Party, by the way. This is someone has taken over the Democrat Party, And it's so perverse what they're doing to our children. I'm a mother of 2. I come from a family of 9. My poor father got 8 girls and 1 boy. And so as a mother and looking at all of my beautiful nieces and nephews who now have children of their own, I can't even imagine the perversion and the twisted thought process that's going into psychologically abusing our children. We send our perfect children into school, and while they're there, in many cases, they're being taught this transgender ideology to think that they're put in the wrong body, that God made them the wrong gender. And God put us in the right body. And this is psychological abuse. It has to be stopped immediately. I think the Department of Education is contributing to this DEI, all of the CRT, all of this garbage with woke ideology. But the most frightening of it all is the Marxism they're teaching. And so we're right here at a crossroads that we're either going to save our country or we'll lose our country, lose our children forever. And what we've done to these children, who my opponent is for, he's for sex changes for kids behind the parents' back. Literally every crazy bad idea that we've seen from the left, my opponent has voted for. He's further to the left than AOC and the Squad and Bernie Sanders and everyone you can imagine. And now he's trying to trick people into thinking he's a moderate. And so we need to wake up the people of Arizona. Not only are your hunting, fishing, your Second Amendment rights, your First Amendment rights, the literal fabric of our country is being torn to shreds by people like my opponent. And it's critical we get out and vote.
Here's my last comment, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ted. My question to you, Keri, is favorite Ted Nugent songs, and then Ted, I'd like you to close it out and tell our listeners what you think of.
I can't sing, so I'm not going to sing it. I don't even want to say it, because if I say it, I'm going to have it in my brain for like 3 days. Cat scratch fever. You knew I was going to say that. It's one of those songs, you hear it and you're like, dang it, that's going to be stuck in my head for hours and hours and hours. But it's a classic. I love it. I love your music. But more than that, Ted, I love the incredible patriot that you've shown us to be over the years. I had no idea when I was back listening to your music that this is the man that you were behind the rocker. And I actually love this man even more.
Well, thank you for that. I'm much too sexy for my Glock, and those damn guitar licks just keep on pouring out. I was born in Detroit, downwind of the Motown Funk Brothers, so my inspiration comes from the greatest musicians in the world, and I've always had the best musicians at my side, so it really is a team effort. And really, that's what Hunter Nation represents, is now we're going to be a team, a united, conservative, conservation, constitutional voting team, because I just spent another campfire last weekend with a legless Marine and a bunch of Green Berets and Navy SEALs, many of which have sacrificed dearly, and they dragged their brothers off the battlefield in pieces. And I believe that that price is on us, that we have to pay for that by voting for the Constitution that they sacrificed for. They sacrificed for their constitutional oath. And as a sheriff deputy for 41 years, and I've got 14 felony arrests to my credit doing raids with the U.S. Marshals like Tom Morrissey right there in Arizona.
Love Tom. He's incredible.
Great hero. But these are the inspirations, and you represent that inspiration that so many heroes of law enforcement and the military, the first responders, the firefighters out there that charge into dangerous situations on behalf of we the people. And now with these terrible storms down in the south and southeast, we see that those flotilla boats that are coming in, those big pickup trucks that are bringing supplies to needy Americans, those are my hunting buddies. Those are my fishing buddies with fishing boats and duck boats. So Keri Lake, thank you for representing the best of the best. And yes, my soundtrack does inspire the best of the best. I still play my guitar every day in between deer hunts and duck hunts. But Keri Lake, you represent a great state. Arizona is a conservative, constitutional conservation state. And we're going to try to prod everybody we can to vote for God, family, country, law, and order. And I've been called a radical and extremist forever, especially in the goofy hippie world of rock and roll, because I stand up for God, family, country. I carry a gun and I eat venison, which are two of the most perfect things you can do. So thank you for your representation of that truth, logic, and common sense. And Keith Mark, creating hunternation.org. We hope everybody gets their family and friends to go to hunternation.org, because we're not going to pick a candidate, but we're going to pick someone who represents God, family, country, Constitution, law and order, work ethic, good over evil. And Keri Lake, we love you for coming on. Stay the course, my dear, and tell Tom Morrissey and all those great conservatives and Republicans in Arizona that we thank them for the sacrifices and the risks and the dedication to make America great again.
I love it. Thank you, guys. Get out and vote early. Arizona, get that ballot sent in. I promise you I will protect our Second Amendment every step of the way. I will protect your right to constitute, to hunt, to fish, to have access to our lands, our federal lands, and I will make you proud. And thank you so much for having me on. I wish I could stay longer in the campfire, but at the campfire, but let's do it again.
You betcha.
Thank you, Keri. Appreciate you coming on.
God bless you guys. Bye-bye.
God bless Arizona, Keri.